Welcome to the Exhaust Notes podcast.
What is good, everyone? Welcome to the Exhaust Notes Formula One podcast. My name's Nick. I'm with my guys, Rohit and Todd, to talk about some racing news that we just felt we needed to share with you before this next race. So before we get into it, though, what's good, fellas? How you guys been?
Trying to find poutine to eat before we commemorate this race in Montreal. Like, I know Montreal is a big food city. What else is there that Montreal is known for? I think poutine and bagels.
And dunks, apparently. I just had some really good Korean poutine. It was very strange.
Ooh, do tell.
Yeah, that sounds pretty good.
It was like poutine with some sort of cheese, which I am not a good foodie in that way to spout off the exact name. But the sauce, like the gravy, was like gochujang based.
Is that how you pronounce that? Because we had a work lunch today and gochujang sauce was there. And I was like, I am not even trying to get fired, even attempting to say this name. So I just called it G sauce.
That's a much different thing. No, I have an Asian wife and she's learned me in the ways. So apparently it's gochujang. I think.
That's
anyway. See, I figured out my Guan Yu Zhou of the year. So thank you for that.
This time next year, you're going to be well versed in Korean food.
Exactly.
It's a good a good tie-in. I actually had gochujang flavored noodles for lunch yesterday. I'll have to take a picture of it. We have like a mini shelf or mini cupboard in this new place that we moved into that's like not big enough to really put anything normal in. So I just made it my ramen or my, instant noodles storage. So got a good variety in there. That's definitely one of the go-tos for me.
I love those little random nooks and crannies in old houses.
Yep, definitely. All right, guys. So in order to kind of officially reiterate and announce that we are now putting the podcast on YouTube, I wanted to share something that I actually hinted at last season before we get into all the news and stuff of today, because one, I need anybody that's listening to this on the podcast to go over to YouTube and, of course, subscribe, hit the links, tap the little bell, whatever the YouTuber's saying is. Yeah. Also, I love that like all YouTubers say the click the button up here or right here or down here, and it's never in the place that they click it. So click the button somewhere on this screen here and hit subscribe for us. But my other announcement, we don't talk about the other pods too much on this show, but I have a podcast called The Crown and Stitch. We talk about hats. We also have the Sneaker History podcast where Rohit and I and Robbie and Mike talk about sneakers. All this is in like Discord community. If you're in the Discord, you know about it. But I kind of got a combination here that I need to just unpackage for you guys. So this is the official first unboxing on the Exhaust Notes channel.
Hey.
Official merchandise. The Haas Rich Energy.
Let's not bury the lead.
Yeah, Rich Energy snapback.
Oh, I need one of those.
So I grabbed this like last year when we started the pod because it was on eBay, and I'm like, I've never seen that before available. I mean, when it was happening, it was available, obviously, but it was like probably 80. Actually, there's no price on it. But, F1 merchandise, they always do the insanely overpriced stuff. So this, a cheap little snapback hat was probably $80 or $90 or something back then. But it was one of the episodes where we were talking about Rich Energy and the chaos and fiasco of that era for Haas. And I was like, wow, this is actually officially licensed merchandise, because there's a lot of bootleg stuff to get T-shirts on eBay. And I've never pulled the trigger on one because I'm like, I just don't even trust that any of these are going to show up real. And like, if it's just a printed shirt, I'll just print my own shirt, Yeah. But had to get a Haas F1 team hat just for the show,
Yeah.
And we're back. Welcome to the Exhaust Notes podcast, the one-stop shop for all things pop culture, Formula One, and the spanner in between. I've got terrific Todd Yates. I've got the knight himself, Nick Engvall. What's going on, fellas?
Just talking a little F1 merch. That's amazing. That's a great pickup.
Might need to be our intro man now.
Yeah.
No,
zoom, zoom. Tonight.
Zoom, zoom, zoom. Just turn it into a strip club DJ character. Hey, coming up next on the stage, we have Todd Yates with Formula One direction and what grinds his gears. Give it away, Todd. Don't forget to tip your waiters and waitresses.
Yes.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Amazing.
I'm here for it.
Guys, I have to ask a question, though. How often buy Formula One merch? Is it a seasonal thing? Or is it just like, hey, you rock with the same team. I got it last year.
It's funny you mention that because when I first got into Formula One, I bought one t-shirt and I realized how hilariously overpriced they were. And as is a common theme, motif, I don't know what you want to call it, I lied to my wife about how expensive it was and subtracted, dare I say, $40 from the price. And you know what? Esteban Ocon will forever be a Renault driver for me, according to this shirt. And it's also one of those things, can't really wear it to work. And I live in Beaverton, so, I mean, if people see me wearing a Le Coq Sportif t-shirt, I'm sure I'm going to be on someone's shit list. So really the joke's on me.
I didn't even think about that part of it, but yeah.
How about you, Todd? I think you're a little bit more of a serial buyer of things.
I was for a while, but then I started to feel like, same, like the last thing I bought, which I was super disappointed in, was the McLaren team jersey, the Danny Rick one, when they first switched themes from that like kind of more bright blue to like the orange and more black. So I bought one of those and I was like, oh, that's cool. I want a Danny Rick jersey, but it's more of like a jersey. It's thin, like, I mean, nylon thin, and it was $90. And I was so put off by the quality of it that I was like, I'm not going to buy officially licensed stuff anymore unless it's like super dope. And I've also changed up to where, like, you just showed us that amazing Rich Energy Haas hat. Like, if a team comes out with just something dope looking, I'm in for it. Yep. Like if Williams has a pretty cool like theme this year with their driver suits and stuff with the golf logos and the Duracell and whatnot. So if they come out with something cool for that, like I would totally get an Albon t-shirt. I have to be a fan of the driver also, though. That's like a rule. Even if Red Bull came out with...
There won't be any Stroll or Latifi shirts or jerseys in your life anytime soon.
Yeah. It's Max also. Like I might get like a Checo something or other Red Bull, but it's got to be super like Mexican themed. Like I want a Red Bull jersey in Mexican flag colors.
Los Muertes
or something like that. Celebrate the dude, right? Yeah. That's my birthday. I would totally do that. How about you, Nick? Are you? Yeah, you're more of an obscure F1 merch buyer.
Yeah, like, so if you don't really know me, I approach most things in life in like the opposite way that all the trends go for some reason, where it's like, oh, nobody likes this shoe anymore. That's the shoe I'm going to be obsessed over. Oh, this shoe is, or this t-shirt or hat is 10 years old and most people won't recognize it. That's the one for me. So Formula One stuff has become that way too, because one, like, there's so many people changing teams at all times, and the colors of the teams change so much that it's not like, other than Red Bull and Ferrari, it's not like you can buy something and really feel like, oh, I'm still supporting the same team next year, right? We know Red Bull's going to have basically the same car livery wise. Ferrari's always going to have primarily red, and I'm, generalizing. They obviously change it a little bit, but to me, those are the only ones that really stand the test of time. And I'm not a hater of either of those teams, but like, I'm just not like a supporter of either of those teams either. So I kind of default to, let me just go after like older, obscure stuff and, wait for things to go on clearance and be like, oh, that's a conversation starter, right? If I'm at Laguna Seca at some race or something, and I'm wearing like a Haas F1 team with a Rich Energy sponsor, somebody's going to ask me about it, because it's like, who would wear this, like, stained sponsor of Formula One, Haas, but that's exactly why I'd wear it, is because somebody'd be like, oh man, that's crazy. What's up with that?
So 2 follow-up questions for you, Mr. Engvall. One, Todd kind of shared his drivers he will not buy any merchandise of in the current grid. Do you have, let's say, 2 to 3 that are in a similar status for you? And then what has been your best Formula One apparel or item encounter out in the wild with somebody you don't know?
So I don't think I really have drivers that I would just 100% say I'd never buy that driver. Because even at times, like, I wouldn't have bought Seb stuff. Right now, I wouldn't be buying Max stuff, but 5-10 years from now, I'll probably get some sort of Max thing, because it's like, I still admire these guys, regardless of who I'm cheering for every week or every race. It's funny, like, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head in terms of people like coming up to me recently, but I'll use this to kind of talk about this hat that I'm wearing, right? It's basically a Mets colored Giants hat. And like, I didn't really think much of it other than like, I obviously know the history of the team. My grandparents were Giants fans when they moved the Giants from New York to San Francisco in the 50s. The Mets were the team that replaced the Giants in New York. The only baseball jersey that I have outside of Giants jerseys is a Mets jersey, because Willie Mays played for the Mets. My brother was a big Darryl Strawberry fan, so I was like, it's colors I like anyway. I'm just going to get the hat. I've had it for like maybe 2 weeks now, 3 weeks, however long I've been wearing it. And I've had 3 people in Monterey, like, basically say, oh, I like that hat. That's such a great story for that hat. And I'm like, wow, people actually know that, like, there's a connection to the Mets with the Giants, like, but like, you wouldn't think that, right? So those are the things that like I'm looking forward to on the racing side. Maybe too deep cut for a lot of people that are into Formula One, but the Bar Honda teams, whenever that was, 03-ish, Jensen Button, Takuma Sato, that era, right? They actually, it wasn't one of those drivers, but I forget the backup driver. They actually set the Bonneville Salt Flats land speed record in the Formula One car back then. And about 6 or 9 months ago, I came across it on eBay. Some random person in, wherever it is, it's Utah, right? Like, basically selling a bunch of this leftover merch. And I can't remember if Aaron saw it first or if I saw it first, and we like text each other, because obviously we were both huge Bar Honda fans. That was like that was probably the peak of my Formula One fandom. It was like, I was really into it, because I was also I am really into Hondas, and they were actually like an exciting team for us. So that was a cool moment, and I'm definitely looking forward to like an actual exchange, because that's one of those weird crossovers of like, if you care about Bonneville, you're probably not a Formula One fan. But if you see a shirt that says Bonneville and Formula One on the same thing, you're probably like, if you know about it, I need to be your friend.
Yeah.
If you don't, you're probably going to be like, what the hell is that? And I'll be like, I got a story for you. Come listen to our podcast. Did you just become my
new best friend for the next 15 minutes? You did.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Yep.
Perfect.
But anyway, speaking of drivers with contracts ending this year and merch that we'll be buying next year on clearance, what do we got?
I've got one to kick this off, but there was a big article on F1.com, and I think that's where we were talking about earlier. But our boy Nicholas, or it's not even Nicholas, it's just Nick with a Y. Does that bother you when you see Nick spelt weird ways, Nick?
Senior Nick correspondent is fairly apathetic towards this development.
Yeah, he didn't care at all.
I don't want to speak on behalf of all Nicholases or Nicks.
Nikolai.
I personally am a Nicholas. I've definitely been a Nikolai for a lot of people in my life, so it doesn't really bother me. I just think the use of a Y, it's like, if we decided to call exhaust notes with a Z, exhaust notes
Oh, I thought you were going to put the Z in notes.
in both.
Oh, fair enough.
Yep. So anyway, our boy Nick DeVries is, according to the F1 media, pretty well onto being in the hot seat. Even after how many races have we had? 7? We're calendared
7.
for 7 races.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And I just want to go over some of his stats, and I want to get your hot takes on whether or not he needs to be cut mid-season, into the season, and then we'll talk about, potential driver offings. So average pace, his average finishing position, Tsunoda's at 10.6. He's at 15.3.
Okay.
In qualifying trim, he's 0.3 off of him in the same car. And all that being said, there's only 2 points separating them. So Yuki has 2 points, DeVries has 0. Do you guys think, because Red Bull, we know, has been probably the pioneers of mid-season driver replacements, swapping up and down. We had it with, let's see, Kvyat, then Daniil Kvyat went up. Then he got replaced by Pierre Gasly. Oh, wait, no, Albon was after Kvyat. Then
Gasly.
I thought
right?
Albon replaced Gasly in the main team.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I swapped that. So it was Kvyat, Gasly, Albon, and then we finally have stability with Checo. But we've talked about it before on the podcast. Like, he's kind of shitting the bed, even though the car is an absolute dog. He's not doing well in any form, and he's making Yuki, who's still having kind of an up and down season, look really good in this case. So what do you guys think? Would you helmet Marco the dude and just swap him in for I'm sure Red Bull has some drivers in the wings that have enough
they
points.
always have drivers in the wings because Red Bull always gives you wings if we're leading to be believed by their tagline. I will say this. Anytime there's this notion of replacing somebody, whether it's a sport, whether it's a player, whether it's a coach, my natural question is, who are you going to replace them with? Because if they bring up somebody, are we really going to see someone have all that much more difference in how they race compared to what Nick DeVries is doing? Because to your point, it's still a dog shit of a car. And if somebody can get points out of that car, then I maintain they've got greener pastures and their time at AlphaTauri is a short one at best.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think also we're kind of in I don't know that we've seen enough with upgrades this year, right? Like people, not to say that it's going to help either of those guys, to be honest, but I feel like they're still going to wait a little bit. Like with what do we have? 22 races this year?
Yep.
In 22, 23. Well, I think one got canceled, so down to 22.
But we're only a third of the way through the season. It seems like it's we're it's half over because Max is basically a couple wins away from his championship. But I think that most of the teams are probably going to be. They're not going to be, even Red Bull, who's aggressive with those changes, probably not going to make any changes for a few more races, right? They kind of want to see how these guys play out with upgrades, and also just who knows, maybe there's track differences that can justify it. But I do think both those guys are definitely on the hot seat. A month or two from now, I wouldn't be surprised if we're seeing a whole new, lineup for AlphaTauri, because to Road's point, if you do it in the middle of the season, at least you're setting yourself up for next season to give these guys seat time in an actual Formula One car, right? As much as we talk about, the progression from, cars to F3 to F2 to F1, it's just like any car, right? You don't really know how to drive that car until you get behind the wheel. Max is a great example of that, right? The more he's been in that Red Bull car, the more comfortable he gets with it, both on a season level, but on a career level, the further away he gets. And I think that's kind of what I would expect from whoever comes in next is like Red Bull's like AlphaTauri is gonna they're gonna hope that next person starts to shine a little bit sooner and they can say, okay, cool, next season we're back in the back in the midfield, right? Like they're absolutely only Williams is lower than them at this point, right? I think Haas has even been scoring points more frequently than them, so not really any denying they're kind of at the bottom of the barrel right now. So,
but all that being said, Nick DeVries keeps performing like this, and Yuki keeps being on the fringes of the points, which is where he, that's overperforming for where the car is, right? We get to the summer break. Do you make a change then? Like you just said, trying to get somebody potentially in the Red Bull camp up a seat, see how they do. They've got another half a season of just basically practice races, right? Like it doesn't matter. There's no pressure. Just like, can you hang? Can you at least keep pace with Yuki-san?
Yeah, I mean, my hot take on that whole thing would be like if Yuki isn't scoring if he doesn't have multiple races with points in the next, what do we have, 4 races to get to summer break, maybe 3? If he's not scoring points in multiple races, and if DeVries isn't scoring points at all, I wouldn't be surprised if both of them are out mid-season.
Do you really think they would get rid of both drivers? That would be drastic.
No, but I mean, the reason why I tend to agree with Nick is the interest in that team has just driven off a cliff, to borrow a bad pun, because previously it was very much looked at as a feeder system, but especially in recent years, it just seems to be like this more burden than anything else, because I do think the talent pipeline has dried up. And it's funny we mentioned the instability at Red Bull, because what caused that instability was Daniel Ricciardo not signing. And I truly wonder how much longer Daniel Ricciardo would have had at Red Bull, and how much longer would he have delayed this inevitable carousel of drivers coming in and out. Because by just doing that, that's our sliding doors moment. And Red Bull previously had this reputation of being a bit cutthroat, but by Ricciardo leaving and them ushering in this new shit show of an era, that took it to a next level.
I mean, and I think it's more of a. I think we talk about drivers all the time, but like, where's the crew pipeline? Where's the mechanics pipeline? The fact that you have AlphaTauri and Red Bull are very stubborn about admitting that the car is trash, right? They're probably going to react harshly and replace both drivers. I'm not saying that it's likely. I think that it's a good possibility, but I think one driver is probably out almost guaranteed by summer break-ish, close to that. But the car itself needs to improve drastically, to your point, Todd. And I think that that based on looking at Pierre Gasly, right? He's in an Alpine car, is obviously much better than AlphaTauri, but he's still in 9th or 10th in the standings. That's impressive for moving into that car that was not necessarily at that level of competition last year, in my opinion. Close, but I wouldn't have expected, if you would have told me to pin where Gasly would be at this point in the season, I would put him, 12th, 13th, 14th, at least a handful of places lower than where he's at, which to me suggests that it's really more of a where's the team that can provide for these drivers? Because obviously, to your point, or to both of your points about what we've seen with Red Bull in the past, right? They obviously have a crazy high standard, highest standard of any of the teams on the grid, in my opinion, right? That's why they win. But at the same time, they've shown that a lot of these drivers are almost better in seats that aren't quite as cutthroat, right? You have to have the right mentality to race for Red Bull and to win right now. I think that's kind of an interesting conundrum that they have, because the AlphaTauri team, it just doesn't seem like there's any desire to compete on that team right now, right? And I know that's generalizing, and I don't mean to put them down in that way, but they're just missing the mark by so much as a team, regardless of the drivers that are in the car. But I don't think that they're willing to look in the mirror and say that about their team.
I am a bit shocked for you being a Yuki fanboy to hear you speak ill of Yuki in that sense, because like when I look at averaging finishing position for Yuki, who's in what we believe to be the 9th or 10th slowest, or 9th or 10th fastest car, whatever, either last or dead last. And for him to have a finishing position of 10.6, like he's nipping on the points on average every race. So, I mean, I know that got skewed a little bit with, I think he got a PA? No,
I mean, he only has 2 points though, right? So
yeah, it'd be a P9. I think he just got the points one race, but averaging finishing position for the rest of the races, right off the points. I think his seat is safe for the year if he continues that. Nick DeVries, I can see him being replaced, especially if they either want to give an F2 driver a shot, or my boy Denny Rick. I don't think he would do it.
But the thing I'll push back at you about, Todd, is for the last couple of years, we've heard about this rising storm in Formula 2, where there always seems to be at least 1 to 2 drivers that are just taking Formula 2 by storm, and they're going to come up to Formula 1 as a question of when and not if. My Formula 2 knowledge is completely non-existent. Is there a driver right now that fits that narrative of young hotshot that's about to set Formula 1 ablaze if and when he makes the transition up?
Well, before you answer that, I do hope that Yuki starts to land in the points. I would love nothing more than to see Yuki get, 7/8 on a regular basis. But I think we see it in his frustration level with the team, right? Like we, what we need? We need a graphics designer person to create us a little like Yuki meter that's like how hot-headed is Yuki during an episode. Because like that to me says a lot about the team, right? Like it doesn't seem like he's just arguing, he's just fighting for this just to fight for it. He's obviously passionate and frustrated with the car itself. So, okay, sorry. I just want to throw that out there before we went on a different direction.
Up there.
Yeah, I'll fire back at your Yuki with some more Yuki first, though. You can tell he's still classic Yuki and very passionate, because he's the race last time when they told him to like pick up the pace, or I don't know what it was, something about braking in certain corners, and he screamed like, "Do you want me to crash?" Which I thought was the funniest, very Kimmy-like in his response. But to respond to Ro, it's not necessarily about who's the hot shot in F2. Red Bull very rarely goes outside of their own pool, which is why they have like 30 sponsored drivers at a time across F2, F3, other the Asian Formula racing and whatever. But they do have Liam Lawson, which is decent in F2. He's got some race wins. He's not anywhere near winning the championship, but I think he would be like a decent person to try out if they wanted to go that route.
And how old is Lawson? Because I think that's the other thing that is probably, whether somebody wants to call it unfair or fair, a mark against DeVries, as I somehow accidentally turned my light off, is the fact that DeVries is relatively old to make his Formula 1 debut, no?
So he won F2 like 8 years ago, and then was a reserve driver for a couple of years, then got picked up by Mercedes to drive for them in Formula E, won the championship, raced in that series for a few years, and then he filled back in last year with that one race when Albon had his appendix explode, whatever. We know the history from there, but he was like 28, I think, when he made his Formula One debut. DeVries is early 20s, I want to say.
Oh, you mean Lawson?
Oh, sorry. Lawson, yes. Lawson is like early 20s.
I think it's going to be interesting, because what can we say about this AlphaTauri team that we haven't already beaten to death in terms of it's a dog shit car? They were once a promising place for drivers that were on the come up. And I think I say this through gritted teeth. I don't know if what you consider Yuki having this year is a up and coming driver, but if he looks better than the other guy, and it's by a noticeable margin, I'm not even going to say it's a sizable margin, then I think it's fait accompli, but we'll see.
So that all that about DeVries, who do we think is going to lose their seats at the end of the year? I think, Ro, you have some stats on who's up.
So who we have up, in no particular order, as I am vamping for time. First of all, both Mercedes drivers are end of contract at the end of this year. So that'll be interesting. I think both are going to be signed. In the case of Mr. Hamilton, that is a question of in the next couple of days, if not the next couple of weeks at the latest. Then we move on to the aforementioned Yuki Tsunoda, who's also out of contract at the end of 23. Zhou Guanyu is another one, as is Alex Albon. And then the one that was kind of interesting to me was, or two, one was Logan Sargent, as was Kevin Magnussen. So, guys, we've got a couple different drivers there. Who's most likely to stay? Who's most likely to go? And then for a person that you think is gone, give me a name. I'll start us off. I am very intrigued by the fact that Kevin Magnussen only had, a 2-year comeback, so to speak, on the cards. I think he's done more than enough to justify at least another 2 years, because as Haas has been making progression in terms of being a average to, dare I say, a good car, it's seemingly tied to the return of Kevin Magnussen. And the only thing I think that could shut this trajectory down is somehow if they decide to go to the well one too many times and bring back the Phoenix himself, Romain Grosjean. What do you guys think?
I mean, I don't think Grosjean's coming back to Formula One anytime soon. I think he seems to be enjoying IndyCar. But the thing that I think about Haas is they have a lot of potential to turn around and have like a big name player join the team, right? Like we kind of alluded to it last season with like Danny Rick. If Danny Rick drives for Haas, his stock goes way up in America, right? He's already top tier Formula One driver in America, fan base wise. But if Haas's car is as good as it seems to be getting, and like Gunther was talking about it again this week, like how much they were excited the progression that they've made. You know, I think the interesting thing about that is like at the end of last season, there was very few people we would even think would potentially take the risk of going to Haas. At the end of this season, the interest in drivers wanting to go to Haas is going to be way higher than it has been in years. So to me, that's a really kind of caveat to whatever that seat looks like. And I like Magnussen, but you know, like let's say Danny Rick, or you know, I doubt that like George would leave Mercedes for any reason at all. But like one of those guys has a good conversation or two with Gunther, and you might have a heavy hitter driving for Haas next season. And it's really nothing against Magnussen. It's just that the contract is up and they're going to explore their options, in my opinion.
I think that's a good call. Like every team always explores their options. Like we heard Ferrari tried to get Christian Horner by throwing the bag at him, and he turned it down smartly. So, but I still think that this rendition of K-Mag seems to be way more kumbaya amongst the team with like Gunther and Gene, and like I feel like they're happy with where they are and they're finally settling into like being a fully funded. They're not like bringing it back to Rich Energy. They don't have any of that drama anymore. They've got like Chipotle and MoneyGram. They've got real sponsors now, and they're finally operating at the cost cap. I think, at least for Haas, I think they're in a good spot. They're happy with their drivers being like, you know, having that off race where they're flying, which we saw last race. Like we talked about it. They were both putting up super quick times in qualifying. The race pace is still shit, but I think it'll come around with some more development, and having the money to do more development and not being like, oh, you know, you don't get a new front wing this race because we can't afford it kind of thing.
And one last thing, I forgot that they had Chipotle as a sponsor. I would like to pay unlimited amounts of money to have Gene Haas, although that would be funny too. Gunter Steiner eating 3 double meat burritos from Chipotle and then just taping the gurgling of his stomach after the fact.
While in a tiny car.
Yep.
In the
That goes without saying.
With Mattia. Yeah.
Team principals in tiny cars getting burritos.
Yes, exactly.
They wouldn't get sued by Jerry Seinfeld at all.
No, that's all part of the Netflix umbrella.
Yep.
Hell, throw Jerry into the car too. Let's make it a total clown show.
God, could you imagine the conversation between Jerry Seinfeld and Gunther?
I'd pay to see that, to be honest.
Yeah. Yes. That's like, who are you going to have at dinner? Like, name 5 people. That would be an amazing to add.
Yeah.
I feel like Gunter Steiner is the most underrated answer somebody could give me for that question, because it always tends to skew political or celebrity, but give me Gunter Steiner.
Yeah. Yep.
I think out of all people in the Formula One grid, even, dare I say, more so than Danny Rick, I would rather have Gunter Steiner at dinner than Danny Rick. Anyway, we're way off base here.
I mean, I just gotta go one step further on this off base thing. The thing that I don't like about the way Formula teams think about drivers and teams and all that stuff is like marketability. If you put Danny Rick and Gunther Steiner together on a team, like, I don't know if you can get a more entertaining 2 people. Like, we all collectively loved Pierre and Yuki, but like Gunther and Danny Rick,
it gives me Lethal Weapon energy in a sense, or like that's the modern day Lethal Weapon, where hell, Ricciardo is Riggs and Murtaugh is played by Gunter Steiner, because I want Danny Rick to get into comedic hijinks and I want Gunter Steiner to look at the camera and make a Jim Halpert face and say, I'm getting too old for this shit.
Yes. I mean, I think that you could actually crowdsource sponsorships with people like that if you really were serious.
That's your spinoff for Drive to Survive. Just give them their own camera crew and just say, you know what, we'll film the rest of the paddock, the rest of the grid. Your responsibility is just to focus on one team, because that's how we truly mark the success of a Netflix show, is the inevitable spinoff. It breaks out.
I agree. So drivers losing their seats, going back to that. I think Zhou Guan Yu is solidly outperforming Bottas this year. I mean, I don't know what Bottas is doing as far as, I think
Bottas has basically adopted the late stage Kimi Räikkönen persona this year, where he's just driving. If he gets any sort of momentum or positive reaction, great. I think he's just trying to count those laps down in his head.
Yeah, it does kind of seem that way.
It does feel like he's a bit checked out, or he's just getting absolutely zero media coverage. But like in his personal life, he's all into like biking now, like doing cycling races off road. Like he's even setting up. He just got his own signature bike, which is pretty crazy. But he seems checked out. I know he's still under contract though, so that leaves us with who? I think Sargent, unless he really turns it around, we're gonna lose the one American driver on the grid.
Yeah, I think so.
And we'll give you a name, but I don't think it'll happen because I think he has Sauber ties. But Theo Pourchaire, he was heavily rumored when the Audi announcement came in that he's got links to Sauber and things like that. But he's been performing at a high level in F2 for many years. I think like since he was 16, and I think he's now 18 or 19. But I think if there's anybody that's a win, not an if, it's him for the next seat in F1. Maybe on a rental to Williams, but.
I have a question for you, Todd. I'm not 100% sure how this works, but like, for instance, I know that the Red Bull F2 group, right? There's like 6 or 8 of them. There's a bunch of dudes that are on Red Bull junior team, right? One of them's an American driver from North Carolina, which obviously would be closely tied to Haas. since they're based in, I think, North Carolina too, right? But there's also like, I think is it Enzo Fittipaldi is on the Red Bull. One of the young Fittipaldis is on the Red Bull junior team. Drivers like that, are they required to stick with Red Bull? Do they have to be bought out by other teams? Like, how would that work? Like, let's say, let's say the world is coming to an end and Haas is like, we're going to blow it all up and we're going to go find two really young drivers and we want these two guys from Red Bull. Do they have to like sign some sort of agreement with Red Bull, or is that just like, I don't even know how that works. Do you?
Yeah. So it's actually funny you mentioned that, because that was a large part of Alpine's big stink when they lost Oscar Piastri last year. They made like this is going to make us re-examine how we're supporting young drivers, yada, yada, yada. But as far as the Red Bull camp is concerned, they definitely are signed to a contract with Red Bull. So if Haas or any team wanted to come in, they would have to get the approval of Red Bull to take that driver, or, which we've seen a lot more in recent years, they get him kind of on a loan. Like Albon is still technically under a Red Bull contract on loan from Red Bull to Williams. That's why you still see him with a Red Bull logo on his helmet.
Got it.
Like he's still in the Red Bull camp, kind of, even though he signed like a 2-year deal with Williams. I think they're just kind of keeping a leash on him just because. But I would assume that if they flat out released Fittipaldi or whoever that was in the Red Bull camp, there would be some money changing hands, unless they just didn't care about the driver.
Interesting thing to think about, because like, I don't think maybe that is something we get more into in a future episode. Like, I definitely haven't followed like all the drivers that came up. I mean, I know a lot of Red Bull makes a big stink about it, right? It's like Max is homegrown and Checo's you know what I mean? Like, but like outside of that, I know George and Mercedes had relationships well before this season. But it'd be interesting to kind of take a look at that and share that, because that definitely also plays into like how we would start to think about predicting who's going where and who's really on the hot seat, right? Because if there's a scenario in which a driver, let's say, since you mentioned Albon, let's say that Williams is paying extra for some reason to Red Bull in order to have Albon drive, then strictly from a business perspective, you have to think that they are going to take that into consideration when they go to other drivers, because if they don't have to pay another team for their driver, they're probably going to be like more likely to move to another driver, right? At least that's my assumption.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know. They have an established talent there with Albon. Like, they know what they're going to get out of him. He'll perform at a high level. He doesn't really have to perform under pressure in the Williams car, at least not currently. But I think if they did take a big leap forward, I think he'd be a solid driver for him. But it's like, as we've learned in the last couple of years, contracts in Formula One mean kind of nothing.
Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see where it plays out. But back to what Rose said, like, there's not a generational talent in this crop of F2 drivers. There's some very good drivers, but I don't think there's any like, George's, Lando's, who's the Oscar Piastri's, like everyone that's super highly touted. So we'll see.
Also, very ironic that Alpine made the stink about all the BS that happened at the end of last season in terms of contracts, and they're the team that came out the best out of all of them, right? Like, they're like unquestionably like what, fifth team, right? Mercedes, Red Bull, yeah. It's crazy.
But I mean, I think it just speaks to who they are. They're a professionally boring team. even more boring than Mercedes, because Mercedes will get you the occasional podium, but it's a nice life to have. But the thing I kind of wanted to segue into now is we've talked a little about Alpine. There is a video game that is coming out that not only features Alpine, but all the other 9 teams on the paddock, and that is EA Sports F123. And there was the video that I think came out today, in fact, around certain drivers receiving and, more importantly, trying to gauge the ratings of their closest competitor or closest friend on the paddock. And what I kind of did while these two guys were waxing poetic, I just made a list of the top 5 in each of the categories. Now, just to give you additional context, when we get these series of rankings for this video game, drivers, all 20 of them, are measured across the following 5 categories: experience, racecraft, awareness, pace, and then just an overall. And to just provide context for each one of those, experience is what we think it is. This is based on the number of race starts a driver has had over the course of their career. Racecraft is the driver's ability to work through their way through the pack and finish in a higher position than where they started. Awareness, the less time spent in the steward's room would help drivers here. And then lastly, pace, which is benefits those who get closest to the fastest qualifying and race lap times. So that being said, guys, what do we make of these charts? Because there are some interesting things when you slice and dice these around those individual categories themselves.
I got to start here because you teed it up perfectly. And I'm guessing you guys haven't looked at the list too in depth. But I play this game every year when it comes out. I'm a nerdy sim racer. I've got a whole sim setup right here that you guys can't see. Someday I'll do it from the sim setup. We'll do a podcast.
Yes.
But every driver they rate every driver out of 100 on these scales. The lowest rated driver for awareness is a 74. It is not Lance Stroll. It's your boy, bro, Zhou Guanyu. What awareness rating do you think Lance Stroll got?
I'm going to go with 80, even though I know what the answer is. But, sometimes you got to lie to the listener.
Now, are these ratings from the other drivers? Is that what we're saying?
No. This is from the game developers.
This is the game itself. Okay, so 2 separate things, right?
The video was other drivers trying to guess the ratings across those 4 to 5 categories. And I think somebody that was conspicuous in his absence was Lance Stroll in that video. And I wonder why that could be.
I mean, I can't even get up to 80. I would say like maybe 76.
You guys are both right there. He got a 78. How is he not the lowest rated driver on awareness?
I mean, you've got Logan Sargent, you've got Nick DeVries, you've got Yuki.
He has benefited from so many new drivers on the grid this year and so many inexperienced drivers because the Zhou Guanyu of it all. Even something with the likes of Yuki. It's Lance's, dare I say, a seasoned driver. It doesn't necessarily mean, but then that goes more to the experience side of things. But like I said, I don't know. What I was going to do to you guys was just read you the top 5 or 6 because there were some ties in each one of the categories. Some of these are fairly self-explanatory. Like if we go through experience, Fernando Alonso is 99, Lewis Hamilton is 97, Sergio Perez is 91, Valtteri Bottas 88, Nico Hülkenberg 86. Now, the only qualms I have is could there only be one person that gets 99? Because I think Hamilton is as close to deserving a 99 as anybody I can think of. But what do you guys make of just the experience top 5?
I think that's a great point. I would say that Lewis has to be. To me, it seems like he's got to be right there with Fernando, right?
It was a bit surprising that, like, if they're going to give Alonso the highest experience rating, which fits, right? He's done the most Grand Prix on the grid, on the current grid. But like Lewis has also been in Formula One since 2008,
6, 7, okay,
yeah,
8, I think. Why is he not a 98? Like a 97 feels a bit disrespectful. No, like I mean it's 2 points, I know, but like.
It's as disrespectful as a 97 as I've ever seen in video game stats, which clearly doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. just bump him up to a 99. Like, he is the greatest driver of his generation. The 8 titles tell you that. Or I'm sorry, the 7 titles.
Asterisk.
7? Thank
Okay,
you.
so that's actually, I think you made the point for the argument for the 97 though, because Alonso has driven from teams anywhere up and down the grid and been Alonso. Lewis hasn't started losing since last season, right?
He's only driven for 2 teams.
He's driven from the front for a very long time.
So having one losing season costs you 2 points of experience per EA. No, and
I mean, I would say like 1 point, right? Like, I think Alonso gets 99 because he is definitely the most experienced, has the most F1 starts. Lewis loses 1 point for having slightly less number of starts, and 1 point for the lack of challenges that he's faced in the last 10 years, right? Last year excluded from that. But I think that's also interesting. Like, I've never played this game. I'm not a video game person per se, but I'd be curious to see what they gave Max for awareness 2-3 years ago when he was like, bullet train into the corner, every corner, no matter who was next to him, right? Because that's like the young driver inexperience / aggressiveness that makes you a great driver in the future. But I think that, like, Lewis had that when he was young, Seb had that when he was young, Max had it for his first couple of years. And it's also the thing that we don't see from these up and coming drivers, right? Like, they're not the type that are just going to push it to the limit and like force somebody to move on their behalf. Well, they also don't have cars to do that, but I don't know. That's really interesting.
It's funny that you mentioned that, because Max Verstappen is the highest rated driver overall among the averages. His pace, 95. His racecraft, 97. Experience, 84, which I thought maybe a touch low. But his awareness is 85 still.
So
which,
let's use it.
No, I just find that funny that almost like the game developers haven't forgotten where Max was a short time ago. And if he was in let's say if he wasn't in a car that was a lap faster than everybody else, and he was in traffic a little bit, maybe we'd have a little bumps and bruises along the way.
I was just going to say, I wouldn't have expected to side with the game developers as somebody who doesn't really play video games that much. But it is interesting, like, if you move away from the experience column on the chart, Lewis and Alonso are tied for second place, right? And I do think that is pretty accurate. Do you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's fair.
If you give them equal machinery, that, like, if there's ever a race that I would want to see, it's Lewis now and Alonso now in equal machinery.
Yeah,
that would be amazing.
That is secretly my one hope I have for the rest of the series. We get at least one race where it's those two just going at it hammer and tongs for a podium, or dare I say first place. Do you guys want to move to racecraft next, since we kind of alluded to it? And if we do, the top 5 there is Max Verstappen at 97, Lewis Hamilton at 94, Sergio Perez at 93, and then a 3-way tie between Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, and Esteban Ocon, all at 92. Does anything stick out for you in that top 5 or top 6, or anyone else in the grid with regards to racecraft as their rating?
Alonso, that's a disrespectful number. If there's anybody on the grid that is craftier in a race car, more crafty than Alonso in a race car, like, I just can't believe that he's that low, or like he's not.
Go ahead.
Like, are you kidding me? He has less racecraft than Esteban Ocon.
That's my favorite thing of this all, because I would just love to be the fly on the wall about when Fernando Alonso reads this list and is like, Ocon? Really? That guy? Because that man has been the bane of his existence for the last 2 to 3 years, depending on how long we want to examine the relationship. I agree. I think Sergio Perez has essentially Fernando Alonso's spot, and then everybody else can drop a point down. I have no issues. In fact, I'm flattered that they have Esteban Ocon on the same level as the rest of this list. because everyone else is, well, no, I think Carlos Sainz has only won one race as well, but this is, to me, a very impressive list to be a part of. And yeah, the Fernando Alonso thing is the one that's baffling. Not only that, Lando Norris also a similar 91, as is your boy Lance Stroll. So talk to me about racecraft again, Mr. Yates, because this truly seems to be the sweet spot for you to have one of your all-time rants.
Yeah, he overtakes people all the time, so he's got racecraft. He pushes them out of the way typically, and then has to go change his front wing, but he overtakes people a lot. So yeah, yep, totally fine with a 91 in racecraft. But let's not forget, let's go back to Alonso for a second. This is the rant that I have, because let's not forget that the only race win that Esti Besti has in his career is because of the absolute clinic of defense that Alonso put on Hamilton in, what was it, Turkey?
Yeah.
2 years ago?
Exactly.
I bet if I was Alonso, I'd be pacing in my room. I can't believe that. Lance Stroll's going to get off easy on this because I'm just pissed about Alonso's racecraft being less than Esteban Ocon.
Listen, it's racecraft and not defense, because we all know if it was defense, Alonso would have gotten a 99 and then still complained about the 1 point that wasn't given to him.
But here's the real thing, the underlying thing that I think is just igniting Todd's fire right now. The definition of racecraft, right? Like you said, the driver's ability to work their way through the pack and finish in a higher position than when they started. If you asked anybody here, who are you taking? Cars aside, don't talk about how Red Bull is 10 times faster than everyone. Who are you taking? There's no hesitation from me. I'm going with Alonso. 100% I'm going with Alonso. I love Lewis. I love Checo. Norris, yeah, he maybe someday he can be up there. But I'm picking Fernando Alonso because he's proven that he can do that year in, year out with terrible cars. His name has been in, the sphere of Formula One for so long with cars that he shouldn't have. Nobody talks about drivers that finish 15th, 16th, and 17th unless they're on a podcast about Formula One. The rest of the world doesn't care about those drivers. They don't even know those drivers. But for a long time, he's been in cars up and down the grid where he's I don't want to get as excited as Todd, but I feel exactly the same way.
You just did. And I appreciate you coming up to my level there, because that's just...
You know what? I will say this. Both of you showed an awareness and an appreciation for the great racing that you guys have seen in your life. And if that was as forced of a segue as Ed felt saying it out loud, you were absolutely correct, listener, because the next category we're going to look at is awareness. And with that one, this is where I'm a little, dare I say, gobsmacked, because number one, and I don't think I would have gotten this guess if you'd given me 19 guesses, Valtteri Bottas with a 97 on awareness, followed by Lewis Hamilton with 94, Sergio Perez with 86, Max Verstappen at 85, Charles Leclerc at 85, and Kevin Magnussen at 85. I'm not saying Valtteri Bottas has no awareness. He has great awareness. But to be head and shoulders above the entire grid, I don't think I could come up with one stat that Valtteri Bottas is that great at over everyone else. Talk to me about this, guys. What am I missing here?
I can rebuttal that.
Don't you dare bring up that peach of an ass.
He's aware he's got cake, first off. No, he is the most aware of a driver to ever play second fiddle to a world champion on the grid that's ever been.
But if we
that
go
joke
back
didn't
to
land
the
at all.
definition of where we got this, the less time spent in the steward's room will help drivers here. That doesn't make any sense to me. So what I'm going to do while you guys talk about this particular subject, I'm going to go to the official Formula One video because I think they might have a slightly better definition. I'll see you guys in 2 minutes.
I think that's where Valtteri probably stands out, right? He's not combative. He probably doesn't have too many penalties. He's pretty consistently finishing without too much drama. If awareness means just getting through races and not fucking up and not running into people, honestly, like he probably is like the most consistent.
Yeah, like with the exception of God, is that same turkey race that Esty Bestie won when Valtteri bowling balled like the top 5 drivers?
Oh, yeah.
That race aside,
it's a big race.
I agree with you, Nick, that he doesn't get crashed into a lot, so he's not putting himself in bad places, right? And he doesn't necessarily crash into folks very often. That race aside again. And he doesn't like really gain a ton, but he also doesn't really lose a ton, right? He knows where he is in the race, if that makes sense.
Yep. And I found the definition, and it kind of makes sense with what we had heard from the other source. Essentially, per Formula One's official website and YouTube page, awareness is a measure of the driver's ability to avoid incidents and penalties in the race. It drops the more frequently a penalty is likely to occur.
More frequently.
Yeah, I don't think he has too many penalties. Like, just,
but maybe
I think early days of racing with Lewis, he probably did. He was a little more aggressive, but I think he kind of settled into that second seat there comfortably and has maintained a very like kind of as long as I survive and I can ride my bike at the end of the race, then I'll be good.
I agree with you though. It is high. Like it's weirdly high that the only other driver in the 90s, I believe, is Lewis Hamilton.
And I think Lewis to me is more likely to get the 97. But then if I look at the rest of the top 5 or top 6 in this case, Sergio Perez, I feel like Lewis should be a 97. Sergio Perez to me is a 94. Max Verstappen, 85. I think he can be a tad bit higher. These next two to me are baffling. The same way Valtteri Bottas at 97 is. Charles Leclerc is at 85. Kevin Magnussen is at 85. They have incidents associated with them. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, that is...
They have racing incidents, but I wouldn't say necessarily penalty deserving incidents.
Suck my balls. That's all out.
Oh, shit.
A measure of the driver's ability to avoid incidents and penalties in the race. They avoid incidents, but they still take penalties on, especially poor Charles.
We missed a great opportunity, though, because after you said suck my balls, one of us should have said, and on to pace, moving up road, taking the pace to the next level.
Yeah. That's what I do. There's a reason why my nickname is the microwave. I just escalate in 30 seconds. But thank you for that, Nick. Let's just go through pace because that's the last category. And I think this one feels still a little bit better baked than some of the other categories we've just kind of gone through. Max Verstappen has a 95 at pace. Fernando Alonso is at 93. George Russell at 91. Lando Norris at 91. Lewis Hamilton at 90. Charles Leclerc at 90. Where we want to start here.
Is this stuff based on last season, or is this stuff based on a combination of last season and this season?
I feel it's a combination of last season and overall history.
Yeah, I would say it's more recent history than like it. I don't think it's just based on this season currently, but like pace wise, obviously, like Max is in the fastest car and he's driving out of his mind. He's going to be the highest, so like that makes sense.
True, but if we are leveraging the component that 99 is the possibility, what else does Max Verstappen have to do to get a 99? Because I think this is as dominant of a era as we've seen a driver have in his 2 championship winning seasons.
So it's pace benefits those who get closest to the fastest qualifying and race lap times. A driver beating their teammate is also taken into consideration. I feel like that's maybe where like Lewis falls down a little bit because he's finally got an equal teammate. Like George is fast, right? He's outpacing him in qualifying and in the race occasionally. So that's maybe where he could fall down a little bit. Like the fact that Alonso's not a 99 compared to his teammate, like.
No, but then where is Checo Perez? Because, okay, I acknowledge the fact that Max is kicking his ass more often than not, but he's still the second fastest driver in terms of overall pace, is he not? Or am I understanding this category.
Well, I think
Well,
he's getting soundly beaten by Max, so
Absolutely.
that's also the interesting part about it, to your point, right? Because like if you look at the list, Yuki Tsunoda has an 87, which is the same as Checo. That means Yuki has a better pace than Bottas, Albon, Ocon. Like it just that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, right?
yeah, I mean that's a fair argument. But like I said, the definitions that I have here on that article that I sent, it's including their qualifying times and race lap times and whether or not you're beating your teammate. Which, if you look at race pace, like Checo is pretty far off Max, like anywhere from 3 to 6/10.
Yeah, I mean, and I guess that also not only is Checo off of Max's pace, but Yuki is exponentially faster. So maybe he gets bonus points and gets up there. I also think that it's really interesting that like to think about how these types of things are done because, we talk about, I think you mentioned like the top 5 row it, but like the reality is the top 5 is actually like a top 6, 7 with all these tied scores. And then like the second, like the 5th or 6th place is like Perez, Sainz, Yuki, who then right after that is Esteban, Valtteri. It's like they're all very tight. Like instead of them saying, here's the 20 drivers and they're separated by 20 points, they definitely were like, well, let's just keep them bunched together. Like we want to keep them. We want the racing to be
train
fun
in terms of
yeah,
ranking.
exactly. Yes, exactly.
That's funny. Well, I hope somehow, some way, you guys end up playing this game at some point.
Hey, EA Sports, give us free copies. We just spent like 45 minutes on this. And thank you for the content, but come on, hook your boys up.
At least me, because I don't have to pay for it again. Also, Julie Wood, I know you're in the video game industry. Maybe you have ties at EA. If you can somehow find out who came up with these driver ratings, we want them on the podcast.
We just want to talk.
We just want to talk. Oh, man. Okay. I think the last piece of news before we wrap this episode up, if I'm not mistaken, I'm going to skip over the net zero targets that are air quotes here for the listeners. We're progressively moving towards in Formula One because I think collectively we all believe that that's BS and we're not really doing anything. The real news is Daniel Ricciardo and Will Arnett hosting. Like, I don't even know how to like express how excited I am to have them broadcast a race for races. Like, it's going to be ridiculous.
Are they doing like color commentary during the race, or are they doing a show about the race? I saw the announcement, but I didn't really.
Here's what we have. ESPN is bringing a new additional viewing option to its coverage of 3 Formula One races this season, with an alternate telecast that will complement the event's traditional production. The host of the new telecast will be Formula One driver Daniel Ricciardo, one of the sport's most popular and charismatic drivers, and actor-comedian Will Arnett, a tremendous fan of the sport who previously hosted a Formula One-centric podcast. The Grandstand with Danny Rick and Will Arnett will debut for the June 18th Formula One Pirelli Canadian Grand Prix, airing on ESPN2 beginning at 1:55 p.m. Eastern, while the traditional race will still be on ABC, coverage beginning at 12:30 p.m. The other 2 editions will be the United States Grand Prix in Austin, Texas on October 22nd, hey, my birthday, and the inaugural Las Vegas Grand Prix on November 18th. Produced by ESPN in collaboration with Peyton Manning's Omaha Productions, the telecast will follow the success of the innovative and critically acclaimed Emmy Award-winning Monday Night Football with Peyton and Eli alternate telecast that debuted in 2021. Yada, yada, yada. Here's a comment from some bigwigs. Oh, here we go. Here's Danny Rick's quote, which is probably the most Danny Rick thing I'm going to say this podcast. This is going to be a hoot. As you'd expect, Will and I are going to be having some fun with the show, but we're hoping it feels like you're watching F1 with your mates. We will have some amazing guests, plenty of laughs, and with some luck, bring fans another step closer to the sport I love so much. Buckle up, America. Can we just call our episode Buckle Up, America?
Yep, definitely. Thanks, Danny Rick. Come on the pod anytime you're ready.
Yep. It's exactly what we think, which is a Manning cast, and I think that's going to be fun because you need entertaining and charismatic people, especially this year where the races have become a little bit more predictable and a little more boring. So I'm intrigued to see what they have. Will Arnett is one of the funniest people to me, if for no other reason, just the sound of his voice alone. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too.
I'm really not. I hope this sucks bad. Because if this is good, Danny Rick's never going to drive again. I know, Iron Trev, I can hear him screaming from Canada. He's probably not going to drive again. But I still hold out a little sliver of hope that somehow he gets back in F1 in a at least decently competitive car. But I like Will Arnett, and obviously I have maybe somewhat sexual feelings for Daniel Ricciardo. He
Here to judge.
He is like just oozes charisma. So he's probably going to be good at this. But somehow I have listened to tidbits of the Will Arnett F1 podcast, and it's not great. Like, I know he's a somewhat new fan, but I'm not a huge fan of like maybe how they produce that podcast or something. But I do like Will Arnett in all the things I've seen him on TV and whatnot. So it's probably going to be good. I hope that it's just too disjointed where it's not fun to like watch the race and hear them go on about whatever the hell. I don't know.
This is my baby rant to go along with your adult full-size man rant. I think the same issue that happened with him at McLaren is going to happen on this cast in terms of they're both going to be funny. They're both going to try to get the last laugh. And I think one thing you desperately need in that booth is a straight person or a straight man, a play-by-play guy that is completely boring and knows how to run a show. Because I am worried if it's just the two of them, I think it's going to go down into a void of chaos, much like this episode is. But then again, we're not representing a large multinational corporation. We're just representing Nick Engvall's hopes and dreams.
Well, I don't know what to say to that, but honestly, like I understand exactly what you're saying, Todd and Rohit, but maybe the glimmer of hope that we can all look at and read deeply into is that they're just going to have a hoot and buckle up America, and that's like a teaser for Danny Rick signing with Haas next season.
Todd, if I could change your mind and say instead of a Danny Rick-led megacast, what if it was a Gunter Steiner podcast, megacast instead?
I don't know. That's a different. Like, I love Gunther reacting to what happens in the paddock in the race. I don't know if he would be. Well, actually, no, I take that back, because the whole My Boat thing when they were in Drive to Survive, when they were taking promo pics for whatever that company was, that was like one of the best moments in Drive to Survive. So he would be funny regardless. I don't think he'd be as good as Danny Rick, but it's
basically what you're saying is like these feelings for Danny Rick are much deeper than just his actions in the last 2 weeks signing this deal. What you really wish is that Danny Rick would have recommitted to racing or said he was done and retired. That way you and your emotions wouldn't be on this swinging pendulum of where Danny Rick goes next, right?
Yes, well put. Like, I know, I mean, I don't want the second news that you said, right? That he's just like, all right, I'm going to be a celebrity now. I'd rather him go to another racing series, whatever, Definitely. Anything, because I think he's still got it in him. But
I also do think that this pivot to broadcast journalism, if we want to call it that, that's entirely down to how popular the sport is. If this sport is not as popular as it is now in America, I don't think they go after Danny Rick, and I think Danny Rick continues to stay the course, if you will, and see if he can grind out one more year as a reserve driver before inevitably taking someone's spot. And more importantly, it's almost a page out of the John Gruden playbook where if he can teach us about this sport and he becomes the voice of this sport in this country, inevitably, whenever he does decide to make another run at it, because I'm in agreement with the both of you that he is going to try to make a run at it, it's going to serve him when he has an entire nation backing him, so to speak, and saying, why not give Danny Rick a shot? So it's a genius move.
Yeah. John Gruden with significantly less racism
Which is
involved,
always
basically.
a plus.
Yeah.
Anytime you can say
Always
the
a
word
plus.
significantly less racist, doesn't matter who it is. If you're the same thing as the version you're being compared to, but you're the significantly less racist one, I'm all for you.
Shouldn't have to be a qualifier, but I guess it is.
We are champions of diversity, if nothing else, here at Exhaust Notes.
We sure are. Curry in a hurry, coming soon.
Yep.
Oh man, I couldn't hold that one back. Hey, honestly, I think this is a great place to wrap up. Just me and my mates talking about Curry and all right, well, another episode in the books, guys. Any parting words before we get out of here?
Oh, Canada.
Oh, here, let's do this. Let's end on our predictions. What do we have as podiums? Nick, start us off.
I think Lewis is going to be top 3. I think Max is probably going to win, and I think Alonso is. I'm going to go Max, Lewis, and Alonso.
Todd?
I'm going to go wild card. I don't know why I feel like this, but Max wins. Alonso P2, Chuck Leclerc P3.
Ooh. I'm going to go for the rare Maxless podium, even though it's never going to happen. Give me Fernando 1, Carlos 2, Checo 3.
Wow.
All right.
All right. We'll see. We'll forget again on our next podcast and then think about
somebody
it.
got that podium right, and it's driving me up the wall to see who it was.
I totally think you're right about that, and I didn't listen back to see if anybody got it.
Listeners, to the person that tells us who it was that predicted that podium, you have my utmost respect and my attempt to say the word predicted correctly. So there you go.
Hey, how about this? We can sweeten the pot. We'll send you an Exhaust Notes T-shirt if you can tell us.
I don't even
who
have
actually
that.
said that.
Do you
Neither
have
do I.
that?
Exactly.
I don't.
Yeah.
It's in the works. It's in the works. I didn't want to tell everybody and like then be stuck to. my
And write us
commitment,
reviews,
so.
you clowns.
But we can definitely do that. We can make that happen. So, all right, guys, how can they find you outside of the show?
You can find me on Instagram at Roadum13, Twitter, Roheezy, OnlyFans. Only if you write me 100 reviews. The ball's in your court, listener.
Oh, God, please write reviews. I'm going to go write another one. I'm on Instagram at dadshoe.jpg. That's SHUE. Slightly regretting doing that for my username. Also on Twitter at dadshoe_F1.
I think you're actually dadshoe_JPEG on Twitter too.
It was something like that. If they search Dad Shoe with a SHUE, which is shout out Michael Schumacher, and if you're listening to F1, you get it. They'll find me.
It'll be linked in the description, whether you're watching or listening. You can find us on the other platforms. You can find me at Nick Engvall everywhere. Most importantly, hit the first link in the description and join the community in the Discord. Watch the race with us this weekend. And yeah, we appreciate you listening. We'll catch you on the next episode. Peace.